Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room.
Good morning and welcome to the third hour of the Situation Room. Today, this is Monday, the 20th day of March, 2023. It's the day of the march, as others have called it. How's it happening out there? We can see some conversations. Okay, some roads have been barricaded in some parts. Where is this? State House City.
Well, I live in that neighborhood. As early as 4:30 this morning, you could not actually drive past State House. There were some very heavily armed, very unfriendly-looking individuals. Seriously. With those...
But they were friendly.
Unfriendly.
But they were friendly.
Unaenda wapi? Said, nitaka kupita. Yeah, ipitiki leo. Rudi. So I got the message, asante sana afande. Yes.
So some parts are like that.
But early in the morning, even I would be grumpy. I mean, 4:30 in the morning, sasa huyu anaenda wapi? Si barabara ni nyingi, zunguke.
Zunguke apitie ingine. Surely. What's happening? So anyway, we want to have that conversation about the state of the country, state of the nation, with the political issues that are taking place, and we're joined by two guests. One of them is the MP for Keharo constituency, the Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, who's also the chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee of the National Assembly. The other one is the former governor of Laikipia County, Ndindi Mureithi, who is an economist, Pan-Africanist, an MSME development specialist, and very many things. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Karibuni sana to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you.
Ndindi, karibu. Make yourself comfortable. That is the hot seat of Kenya's biggest conversation. It will be comfortable as the time goes by. Yeah, karibu sana. It's good to have you on the show. And Mheshimiwa Ndindi has been here before. You're the one who hasn't been here before, Mheshimiwa, and not Nyoro. So let's welcome you, the Honorable Ndindi Nyoro. Karibu sana to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you very much, Eric and the team. This is my first time to come to Spice FM. And I'm glad also to come with the former governor so that we can be able to give our opinions on what is happening around the country.
Right.
So asante sana kwa mwaliko.
Karibu sana.
Na pia nareta salams. I was yesterday in Murang'a in Keharo, where we had a big event celebrating the 39th anniversary of the diocese where I attend church, ACK, Mount Kenya Central. And everyone is calling upon us as leaders to maintain peace, because sasa ni wakati wa kazi. Tusukume Kenya mbele, and every heart is needed for this to endeavor to be successful.
Very good. To welcome you both, City has the day's proverb.
Yes, our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the country of Kenya. Because a man has injured your goat, you do not go out and kill his bull.
Because a man has injured your goat, you do not go out and kill his bull.
Yes. That is not the right response.
That's the right response.
Yes.
Hmm?
And the goat isn't dead.
It's just injured.
Yes.
What's your interpretation of this?
In which language, some of the Kenyan languages, could this?
I think your question is a pertinent one. Let me give it a pertinent answer. I avoided that completely. I decided to make it as generic as possible, so that because the moment I classify it, because it is true, when you research these things, you're told this proverb comes from this region.
Indeed.
But what I've also found is that many proverbs are cross-cutting. You'll find that every community has a way in which they look at that proverb. So that particular literary license, I have allowed myself to take, and I'm allowing you to partake of it as well. So please, interpret it as you see fit.
Well, I don't know. I would think a retro interpretation. It says what it sounds like. That, if your goat is injured, the correct response might not be to kill the person's a bull. It's a bit like the way what you said about your approach or your use of State House Road, or one of the roads near there.
I normally use State House Road when I'm coming to work. Yes.
That there's no reason for the peacekeepers to be hostile to you, after all.
4:30 in the morning, I can understand. It's cold.
And everybody's
And
grumpy.
somebody may not even have eaten, you don't know. But let's look at a goat, and let's look at communities where the goat has an exchange capacity in terms of a common Kenyan currency called the shilling. When somebody is told, using the proverb, that somebody's goat has been injured or the leg has been broken, what are they saying?
That's why I was rather hesitant, because in some parts, like I suspect where Mheshimiwa Ndindi is from, the interpretation of that, a goat has been injured,
Yes.
has very
A completely different meaning.
absolutely. And I would be very hesitant to going down that road. It has a very, very different meaning.
Yes.
Around relations.
It has matrimonial consequences.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So,
Mheshimiwa Ndindi, what's your interpretation of that proverb?
My interpretation ni ile ya Kiswahili, ukimwaga ugali tunamwaga chapati ama kitoweo. That is the interpretation I got. Yeah,
Do one and you spoil everything.
Yes.
I think so.
All right, gentlemen, so we have an issue, and this is with regards to the state of the nation today. Mheshimiwa, you are in the leadership of Parliament. You chair a very important committee of Parliament, Budget and Appropriations. You are also a very influential leader in Kenya Cons and the administration, and you know the work that you've been doing. Mheshimiwa Ndindi here was the chair of the board of the presidential campaign secretariat of the Azimio candidate. And the Azimio leadership has now called nationwide demonstrations. There's been a series of meetings and demonstrations and all that are said to be culminating into today. And the issues that have been canvassed by the Azimio have been wide-ranging but centering on several things. One, cost of living. Two, in the politics around the election. Open the servers, do not reconstitute IEBC, and several other conversations. Now, these conversations, I want to start with you, Ndindi. These conversations around the reason for today's demonstrations, are they actually coherent yet? Because there are some members of Azimio who have said, we actually do not understand the game plan or the end game.
well, that would be unfortunate indeed. I mean, the issues are straightforward, and the conversation is coherent. The purpose of any government is to solve real issues that affect the citizens of that nation. And the citizens of Kenya, power belongs to them. I mean, if you read the constitutive part of the Constitution of Kenya, we say we, the people of Kenya, recognizing and so on, and will ourselves a constitution because sovereignty belongs to us. So we exercise our sovereignty either directly or through elected representatives. Now, so at any time, the citizen must be vigilant as to what is happening with her country. Now, and I think anybody looking at Kenya right now can see that major questions. The country is in a crisis. The cost of, if your currency has depreciated 40% in 2 years, I don't think you can sit pretty and say that things are working correctly. If the cost of living is going up 10%, 12% year on year, I don't think you can say that things are sitting pretty. When there is drought in major parts of the Republic, people frankly are facing very dire circumstances. All these questions require proper, consistent action by authorities. And where that is not happening, then the citizen must stand up and say, look, something is dramatically wrong. Now, I know you've said you've characterized it as say, Azimio, but I don't think. I mean, you don't have to have voted for Azimio to be honest with the condition of your own nation. So, the demonstrations and so on, the citizen conversations that have been going on, they are not just by or for people who supported Azimio. These are conversations by Kenyans about the state of the nation and what should be done. And I hope we'll get into what actually should be done to fix, an economy that is not working.
Mheshimiwa Nyoro, I want to hear from you in terms of, look, these are conversations we've been having over the last, months, last 2 months or so. And to ask ourselves, it's clear that, life is expensive in Kenya. Cost of living is high. It has been for some time. Do you think these are issues in the country right now, from where you sit? Do you think these are actual issues? Some of the ones that the Azimio leadership is bringing up that is going towards mass action, and even others. Do you think those are issues that ought to be dealt with?
I agree those are real issues. Issues of the cost of living. They are objective issues, which of course we are addressing. But what baffles me is the duplicity at which I hear from my brother, the former governor, Derito. Because he has rightly put it that the country is not in good shape in terms of currency, but he has gone ahead to say for the last 2 years. Inflation, he has cited some figures which are incorrect. The current inflation rate in the country is just around 7%. It was actually the highest last year, which was around 9.1%. Last year, when it wasn't at its apex, we never saw maandamano from any quarter because Kenya is a democracy. And there is the tenets of democracy. The reason why we go for elections after every 5 years is so that we can evaluate the leadership there is in the country. We can give them new mandate or even change. And therefore, the sequence at which we go to elections gives everyone an opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, we have to go to the basis of the maandamano we are talking about. What are the issues? The number one issue is rotating around this other person won, this other person didn't win. And I think Kenya is now past that already. We have institutions in the country. One of the institutions is a commission called IEBC. We went to the polls in August. And this was a very unusual poll. Unusual to the fact that we had the incumbent, of course, supporting the former prime minister. They had all the instruments of power anyone would wish for when running for a seat. They had taken over every institution, including the media like the one I'm in today. They had succeeded in doing all that. Unfortunately or fortunately, the people of Kenya exercised the exact power that the governor is talking about. They went to the ballot and elected the current leadership. What am I trying to say? After that, the same people from Azimio, they started talking about servers. Unfortunately, they don't know that these elections didn't have servers. The kind of server and the password they are looking for, every Kenyan has. You just needed to go to the portal and see for yourself and tabulate the results. The only server that was needed is a calculator, which I think they had. I see all of them have phones. And therefore, we must stop taking Kenyans into some kind of a ride. After that, we went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court pronounced itself very eloquently. I mean, we went to the elections last year. We went through the processes, even of appeal. We are now here. The current government must be given time to exercise its authority in terms of building the country, which we are doing, and I'm sure we'll get time to go into that.
I want to go to something specific because I know that a lot of this is laced with politics. We cannot run away from the politics. Yeah. But I think you as Ndindi Nyoro, are in a very unique position. And I say this because your constituency has done excellently well under your leadership. I don't think we can run away from that. Yeah. How is it then? And this is the thing, that usually, because we say development begets development, that want to see something happening so well, then would want to take that and then, extrapolate to other parts of the country or emulate in other parts of the country. You are in parliament. It is not your first run in the rodeo. Why then do we see, and you again now chair a very, very strategic committee. Why can't we see the kind of work that you do in Kiharu spread through to other members of parliament? Because these are some of the issues we talk about, cost of living. But somehow children in Kiharu are going to school. Roads are fantastic. Water is flowing. Things that the Kenyans are crying about today that is forcing people to go mandamano are happening in Kiharu. You're sitting in parliament. Parliament, as a legislative body, lawmaking body, seems to be grappling with these issues. From the 12th parliament, it's now living in the 13th parliament. And I'm asking you that question specifically because you're doing a good job at it. Why can it not happen? I mean, congratulations. We have to say it and call it out for what it is. Why can it not happen? Why cannot these issues actually be dealt with from the parliamentary level?
Thank you very much, even for the compliments. We try our best, and especially in involving the people that we lead. We never do any project in Kiharu out of our kujiambia. We do a lot of holistic public participations and also involve the people in those projects. Many members of parliament are doing a fantastic job. Majority of them, especially the new one, are reaching out to those of us who have been there, and we are doing our best to assist in terms of guiding. But I also want to talk about the other setup, because you have put this question in two dimensions. Why can't whatever is happening in Kiharu be, first of all, extrapolated to other constituencies? That already is happening, and we are doing our best. By the way, we have hosted around 40 MPs so far from last quarter of last year, around 40 of them in terms of benchmarking. Even on this Saturday, we are having another round of benchmarking where we invite around 12 members of parliament with their teams, and we show them what we do. But how economy is structured is that economy has some segments called taxonomies. There are issues that you can do in terms of projects that touches on a taxonomy. And then there are macro policies. There is very little, for example, a member of parliament can do in their constituency using CDF. They can do some few issues here and there patching, but they can do very little, for example, in terms of cost of living. They can do very little, for example, in terms of holistic policy around unemployment.
Or electoral reforms.
Macro or electoral reforms. There are some macro policies that you'll need a national platform for them to be able to permeate to where the Kenyans are. And that is what we are doing on the other side of the budget, on the other side of Kenya Kwanza in terms of macro leadership. We have been able to identify the areas that we need to focus on. One of the areas, in terms of the cost of living, we have realized one of the cures is not madamano. One of the cures is not eating sufurias on the streets. What you need to do, number one, is to attack the supply side of food. Because when you talk about inflation and the cost of living, we are talking about two sides. And allow me just to make this point. Inflation has two dimensions. One, there is monetary focused inflation or monetary based inflation, where the only way to cure that is through monetary policies. When there is a lot of supply of money, then you inject some monetary policies to stabilize. There is the other kind of inflation which is physical in nature. And the one that is physical in nature has a lot to do with supply chains. For example, to give you an example, you may have a kiosk here at Standard Group. You sell, for example, lunch to the staff of, let me actually use Unga. You have a kiosk in Mombasa Road, in an estate, Imara Daima is just here. You sell Unga. The Unga you sell, then you realize there is, all of a sudden, there is a benevolent person who have visited the Imara Daima, and every person seems to have money in the pocket. And now because they have so much money in the pocket, and the kiosk sells 12 bales of Unga per day, then there is a longer queue of people demanding the same Unga. What do you do as a person, as a business person, and especially when you come from the area I come from? When you see a long queue, and then you're selling Unga, and the Unga is limited, what do you do as a business person? You hike the price. Now that is one of the monetary forecast inflation, because the supply of food remains the same or Unga, but then people have more money. Then what do you do to mop out this money? Now,
You
let
know,
me finish, Governor.
We shouldn't trivialize. We
Please,
should not. No.
I come from an area where, and you know very well,
Yes, and
that you give a leader time to speak. Then when you are given some time to speak,
we are all leaders in this room.
then speak.
And we have been listening to you very patiently, Mheshimiwa.
But you came
I
here
am-
as a panelist.
I'm just suggesting
Give them
to
some
you,
work to do. They are paid to be part.
let us not trivialize.
I
what
agree, but you
inflation
get your
is.
time to speak. Can
Let
I
us not
just finish?
trivialize. Please do. But let us not trivialize.
You know, Governor, you used to be a good man before you joined that outfit. Give other people time to speak,
Proceed.
then you get your time to speak.
Proceed.
That is monetary focused inflation. The way you deal with it is to adopt some monetary policies, which mops out money from the pockets of these people from Imaradaima, so that then there is an equilibrium between demand and supply. There is the other one, which is physical. The one that is physical in nature is where you have the same kiosk. You are selling unga, the same 12 bales. You understand, Latif? People have the same purchasing power. They are monetary, their pockets are the same. Let me not use jargons. Then, the lorry that delivers uga to this kiosk develops a problem on a Thursday. So the uga that comes as 12 bales, the owner of the kiosk only have 3 bales, which were left yesterday. So what do? The same people are demanding for the uga they demand every day, but then there are fewer bales of unga. So when you are a owner of a kiosk, what do? You have fewer bales, but the demand remains the same. You hack the unga. So the issues we are talking about, inflation, have been caused especially by the physical nature of the global economy. One, the supply chain. Ukraine and Russia, prior to the war, have been accounting for over 30% of world wheat export. The same two countries have been accounting for around 26% of the world corn exports. What do I mean? There has been those shocks. Then coming back home, there has been drought and famine. Those are also physical issues. We are dealing with them. When I get time, I'll explain, around fertilizer, around inputs, and I am sure within a short time, the issue about the cost of living will stabilize.
Okay. So basically what you're doing now is you are fixing the truck that is stuck in Mlolongo, bringing the unga to Imaradaima.
You are a very good student.
Okay. So in the meantime, the people of Imaradaima, once those 3 bales are bought, they can remain hungry and wait for the truck to arrive.
Actually, you're very optimistic. I'm asking if that truck actually exists.
Well, it brought the unga.
And
It
if
brought
it
the unga
exists,
yesterday.
whether it has unga inside or whether it has cement.
It brought the unga
Is it
yesterday,
still
so
my
we can
time
only
or,
assume that it's coming.
I'm really disappointed, Mheshimiwa, that you say, as an MP, you can do nothing, because every year, the CS Treasury is required by law to send to Parliament his inflation target.
Every year.
Every single year, the Minister for Treasury, the CS Treasury, is required by the Banking Act to write a formal notice to the central bank saying what is the government's inflation target.
What do you mean inflation target?
And allow me then to explain. And get this, the inflation target that this government has set is 7.5%. So the government is happy if prices are rising by 7.5%. Where do you get this information? Just log on to the Treasury website and you will see the last notice that the minister issued. Most importantly, he has to table it in Parliament, where Mheshimiwa is. Now, if they want inflation to go down, the first step must be to revise the target. You ask, what is the target? The target is like this.
Yes.
Government says in writing by what percentage they are happy if prices are rising.
There's a ceiling they put. So the inflation target is the ceiling.
Oh, it's a
marker.
You can call it. It's a marker. It's a target, and this is what then happens. If you when you say, as they have now, 7.5%, when labor unions are negotiating wages, that is what they'll use. When Kenya Power sends you a bill and you find there something called inflation adjustment,
That's it.
That's what it is. Yeah. When IPRA is looking at fuel prices, when businesses are setting prices, that is what they are using.
And it's the government that sets this.
And it is the government that sets this. And it is 7.5% as we speak. So the reason Kenyans are not convinced with what Mheshimiwa is saying is that if you truly are serious about tackling inflation, the first thing you do is to lower that target, because that is what today Kenya Power, unions, businesses are using.
If you lower the target, Mheshimiwa, does it actually affect the inflation rate?
It's a self-fulfilling thing. Go with the sequence again. This year, as labor unions are sitting now to negotiate with employers, that's the rate they are using. As Kenya Power is sending you a bill, that is the rate they are using as inflation adjustment. So, and it has been tested worldwide. I mean, this is not something new in the way economies are run. So, the first step of any serious government intending to bring down inflation would have been to bring down that target. Now, this government is doing no such thing.
By bringing down the target again, what does that mean? Does it look at the macro and microeconomics of the country and then look at this is the likely direction that our inflation is going to take? And so therefore, let's set a marker. Because if you look at the central bank figures for the last year, since May 2022, annual average inflation in May last year was 6.16%, 12-month inflation 7.8%. It has been rising up to February, 8.3%, annual average inflation, and 12-month inflation of 9.23%. It's been rising. So when the government looks at that and the National Treasury says, okay, 7, what is it, 7.3?
7.5.
7.5%, and the February inflation rate is at 8.3%. What does that mean? And then you respond to this.
It means that they are not achieving the target that they have set. That's what it means. That because first of all,
so
if you ask an economist
already
like
the
me,
National Treasury's target is
7.5.
Lower than the market.
Than what they are achieving. It means that their efforts to control inflation are not succeeding in as well as they would have preferred. But I think the big point I'm trying to make here is that why are you setting a 7.5%? Why is it not 0? Why is it not 1%? Because that is you, the government, setting, if you will, the threshold of pain you feel that people should endure.
Mheshimiwa, that's the theory. Where has the government ever set that 1%, 2%, 3%?
Inflation targeting started in New Zealand in 1989. That was the first banking act that specified that the minister should, and we, Kenya and many other countries in the 90s adopted inflation targeting. It is everywhere. In Nordic countries, for example, they have set it between 0 and 1%. In the US, 2%.
Is this what also then determines interest rates that are charged or bank rates that are determined by the central bank and all these financial things that we're always dealing with and always being told some percentage or the other?
Well, indeed, because you want to be in positive, we say positive real interest. So if you have set the inflation target at 7.5, for you not to have negative interest, then your interest rates needs to be above 7.5%. But I want to emphasize here, the determination of 7.5% is an internal policy-driven thing.
It's a mechanism that is set by the government.
What Mheshimiwa here should do is summon the CS Treasury to say, why is this target 7.5%? Why is it not 0? Why should you as government inbuild a mechanism for increasing the cost of living by 7.5%?
Maybe Mheshimiwa needs to respond to that.
He'll respond to this.
Absolutely.
Let's take a break. Let's take a break first. 25 minutes to 9. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Jarito Muriithi, former governor of Laikipia County. He's an economist. He's a former assistant minister in the Treasury.
Not treasury, but industrialization. Close enough.
Industrialization
Thank you. You
and
treasury.
And treasury.
They are close enough.
Or financial industrialization.
He's also a development specialist for MSMEs. And also, Ndindi Nyoro is a member of parliament for Kiharo constituency, chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee of the National Assembly. We are looking at the issues that are affecting the country today. Where lie the solutions? Is it in demonstrations? Is it in telling members of parliament to go home and we send new members of parliament? Is it members of parliament doing their job? Is the national government doing what it's supposed to do? Is it us moving out of this country and living? All those are options. Ndu, please tell them the option of taking Minute Maid juice.
A refreshing break, I think, is what is necessary at this point in time. And a Minute Maid offers just that. A minute to take advantage of the great flavors that Minute Maid offers. An aha moment. I think we need one now, gentlemen, don't we?
Indeed we do.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Life.
Here's the secret to tasty meals every day. Salit. A triple refined vegetable oil for fresh, crispy food. Salit oil is cholesterol free. Salit. Siri ndio hiyo.
But Mr. Ashong, I'm the one who killed him. I have to turn myself in.
Sonia, your children need you. We all have our own sins, and we all pay for them. Choose how you pay for yours. It doesn't have to be in there.
Ako, take care of your brother, okay?
Are you all right? That sounded a little serious. Miss Anna, hi, I'm your driver.
Oh no, I lost my passport.
Wait, maybe you left it in that driver's car.
It's been 12 years now. I'm glad all our sacrifices have not been in vain.
What are you doing here? This is my husband's grave. Choose boldness. Celebrate the skin you're in and dress with confidence with Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Body Lotion. The triple-layered care of deep moisture serum, precious cocoa butter, and vitamin E enriches your skin for 48 hours. Choose to wear your skin with pride with Nivea.
Baadaye ataenda kucheza nje na hii baridi yote. Why did you let him go? Si atagonjeka.
Sasa asipofanya tizi, how will he win more trophies? To protect our family from germs that cause illness when it's cold, we use Dettol soap.
Dettol soap with germ defense gives you protection. When it's cold, germs are transferred in different ways. And Dettol soap's germ defense protects you from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol.
Haijalishi nyumba ni kubwa kiasi gani.
Nyumba ni kubwa inakaa cathedral.
Come on guys, let's give your daddy a big hug.
Jambo kuu ni kwamba kuna upendo ndani yake.
You know you're mine.
Messi!
Watu wanawachana kwa familia. Mimi nimetembea
katika mahusiano ya kifamilia, mmoja wao mara nyingine anaweza kutaka kukimbia kutoka kwa familia.
Kutoka kwa familia wanaweza toboa peke yao kule nje, wanataka kusambaratisha familia. Na sitakubali.
Unanichua kweli wewe? Unanichua? Please remember to subscribe. Nini naendelea?
Familia iliyosukwa pamoja, iliunganishwa kwa chaguo, iliyoimarishwa pamoja.
Please do, because once you text the word Two Rivers to 22365, Centum Real Estate are going to get back to you and they'll tell you about the apartments that they're putting up at Two Rivers and how you can get into owning them. And it's a very easy way of owning them. Number one, you can think of how much rent you're paying currently wherever you're paying rent, and you can actually transfer that rent into renting as you own. So you use that as part of your payment towards home ownership. Also, think about the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company. So, you know, KMRC allows you to go into your bank, your participating banks and the participating SACCO, and you can ask your SACCO or your bank, I want a KMRC deal. You get to take a mortgage of up to 25 years at below 10%. That's about 8 to 9% interest rate per year. And it's fixed for the duration of the tenure, for the tenure of your loan. So imagine that. And you get to own new, good apartments, 24-hour supply water, 24-hour supply power, security, good living experience, good place that you can live in, and it's close to all the amenities, schools, hospitals, the city center, the shopping malls, the largest shopping mall in Eastern Central Africa. Two Rivers, text those two words to 22365. The Honorable Ndindi Nyoro and the Honorable Ndindi are still here with us. Ndindi, you are about to respond to the issue of that Ndindi had raised.
Thank you very much, and I request my good brother governor, we listen to each other so that we do not have to rebuttal so much, because I listened to him talking about that MPs can do nothing about the current situation in terms of macro. If you were listening, instead of trying to speak when I was speaking, you would have heard clearly that I said the MPs in terms of CDF, they deal with taxonomies. We deal with real projects. But MPs in terms of what we can do in terms of macro is, for example, the seat that we occupy in the budget and our role also in parliament in terms of setting policies, in terms of assisting the government of the day in fulfilling the physical agenda. So I never said that you can do nothing. Number two, the issue of inflation, targets, benchmarks, and in terms of the real. Governor and Eric, I got your question very clearly, that what should Treasury do? Is it to paint a rosy picture and say our target for inflation is 2% like the US? Or is it to communicate empirically derived inflation rate? The role of the Treasury gives a guidance. These inflation rates are used by many people in terms of decision making. They have to be factual. It is not a wish list that you come today and say, we are lowering inflation rate to 2%. You are lowering inflation rates to 0.1%. This is derived empirically using the real circumstances that are there in the economy. And even using the examples that he gave, the federal US interest rate target is around 2%. But relative, what is the current US interest rate? It is 7.6%. Therefore, which should you use now as a consumer? When you go as a consumer to buy, the things you're buying are not based on the target. They are based on the actual. And what you are doing in terms of the actual is what I was describing before. And you asked a very important question about the example that I gave about a kiosk. Then what happens if the trailer actually imekwama kabisa? It never arrives. What we are doing, Latif, is to attack the real issues on the basis. And I was trying to derive the point around the cost of living. In the cost of inflation, or in the basket that calculates inflation, the food basket, the proportion of food is the highest. So what are we doing about food? And especially when I'm trying also to check on when the governor were in power, what were they doing? Because then economics all the time is comparative in nature. It's not absolute. Let's check last year vis-a-vis this year.
Remember, you were in power last year. Please don't say the governor were in power. You were a member of parliament last year. The same role the parliament is playing this year is the same role the parliament should have been playing last year. So continue.
Eric, I'm sure you live in Kenya and you know exactly what I mean.
Yes, that you were sent by the people of Kiharu to represent them in parliament. That's what I mean. Continue, Mheshimiwa.
In terms of inflation, what did they do? Let me even talk about Unga. Last year, they came up with Uga subsidy, which was meant to subsidize Uga to 100 shillings. In that subsidy, within 2 months only, they gobbled up around 4 billion Kenya shillings. This money, literally, was stolen. 4 billion Kenya shillings, ostensibly to stabilize Uga prices to 100. Uga prices never moved from the 230 price that was there then. But the 4 billion vanished. Who are paid this money? Maybe the governor will tell us. We have been trying to look for the documentation on who was paid, and it is clear, very clear, the people who were paid had nothing to do with stabilizing Uga prices. That's one. How much is Uga price now? I checked yesterday, I said I was in Murang'a. Uga prices are ranging from 180 to 195, depending on the brand. Yes, it is not at the desirable price. And we are doing everything possible to bring it lower and sustainably lower. But we are not subsidizing any consumption. Instead, what are we doing?
You're subsidizing the input, is what you're saying.
In this year's, actually in the supplementary budget itself, even forget about the BPS we are making now for the next year's budget. we have already put in Kenya shillings 10 billion in terms of subsidizing fertilizer to 3,500. That is already happening. Farmers are already getting fertilizer. We have gone ahead. Fertilizer has the provision side, but then there is a structural side, the administrative side. What do I mean? You may say as a government you are subsidizing fertilizer. Then you subsidize in Mombasa. Then traders pick up fertilizer. They buy at 3,500. Then they sell to our farmers in Muranga, in Awendo, in whichever other place at 6,000. So we are attacking this issue on both sides. One, in terms of lowering the price by subsidizing, but then administratively, how do you make sure that the target farmers are the ones that benefit? We run a zero cost farmers registration. Why do I say zero cost? Last year, the same regime ran as some kind of farmers registration. They gobbled up billions of money. There is no register yet. We just used our administrators. We now have the farmers register in the country, including the acreage of their farms, so that then we are giving targeted subsidized fertilizer given the production capacity you have in terms of the farm. That is one side. What else are we doing? We have looked at the basket of food. One is uga, is our staple food. Number two is rice. We have already, in the supplementary budget, put up money, number one, to be able to kufufua, to revive Bura irrigation in Tana River, Bura 1. We have already put in money this time. We have already put in money for irrigation, so that even as we target the soft side, we target the hard part, which is physical in nature, which is production in nature. The other side, of course, in the food basket is cooking oil. Eric, do you know that edible oil is actually the number 2 export in Kenya? Ukiondoa mafuta ya gari na ya petroli na ya diesel.
Import. Export or import?
Sorry, import. The number 2 import in the country is edible oil. Where does it come from? When you ask some people, they may think it comes from the supermarket. And then they may try to target that inflation from the supermarket side. We are asking ourselves, what is the input in terms of edible oils? We are focusing on canola, we are focusing on sunflower oil, because the supply chains that were there globally were actually hampered by Ukraine-Russia war, which previously was accounting to over 60% of sunflower oil and sunflower food globally. And therefore, trying to answer even the question about Latif and what happens if the trader comes to a cropper, what the specific economists have learned out of the disruptions of the global supply chain of food is that you have to be inward looking. We have to be inward looking in terms of food security, in terms of food production, and that is precisely what we are doing, even demonstrating that by the way we are allocating resources.
Mheshimiwa Ndindi, looking at, just hearing what Mheshimiwa Nyoro is saying, and some of the things, the way in which they're being explained is that they need time to unfold. If we're looking at inputs at lower prices, what that will then come out to is an output that will be cheaper than to purchase, isn't it? And one of the things that they've said is that, and I think this has reverberated through the conversations over the last 3 months at least, is that we've just gotten into the driver's seat. And these are some of the things that we're already doing. How about you give us a minute for these things to unfold? Give us some time for this seed to germinate and grow, and then allow us to harvest. That's one. Then number 2, will a mass action bring about the results that people are crying for?
Well, what I hear, frankly, are excuses. Okay.
Time, like time?
What I hear excuses by our colleagues that, we are new. First of all, they are not new. They are part of this country. They've been part of government. They were part of government last year. They've been part of government going back 20 years, even longer. Yeah, I think the Prime Cabinet Secretary was a cabinet minister in 1990. I'm not sure where Mr. Nyoro was in 1990.
He was even a vice president.
He was a vice president. So the current president was deputy president for 10 years.
Okay, where are the excuses?
So the excuses are that we are new or we need time. I explained, and let me try again. The Minister for Finance is expected to issue a notice, which he does, which is notice to central bank on price stability and government's economic policy. And you can go online and download it and read it for yourself. Now, how long should it take a minister to issue this notice? Do you need 1 day? Do you need 1 year? Yeah? So what we are hearing is an excuse. The supply side questions. Should we, as a nation, not move to irrigated agriculture? That is not a new conversation. That has been the same conversation over, since the time of, Kibaki 1 or NARC. So creating dams, building irrigation schemes, that is not a new thing. It is something that has been ongoing for some time. But there are practical things governments are doing. And you see, of course, I agree, we should compare. So why don't we compare Kenya with other countries? And say, okay, how are other countries doing with inflation? How is it that inflation is 1.3% in Benin, in West Africa, which is a small economy? How is it that it is 2.5% around the corner here in the Seychelles? How is it that it is nearly 3% here in Eritrea, which are small economies? How is it that it is 4.9% with our neighbors here in Tanzania? What is it that those countries are doing that our own is not doing? So yes, we should compare. Now, what you will see is that decisive action and leadership is what matters. Just as inflation is, say, 1.3% in Benin and 2.3% here in the Seychelles, it is 230% in Zimbabwe. So the real, it is 10.5% here in Uganda.
Okay, well, sure.
Yeah. So the leadership, yes, Eric. Leadership is the most critical ingredient in putting the right.
Then let's question the leadership and the specific actions that it's doing, because I think it's important. If they say that this is what they're doing, and you don't think that that works, then tell us this is why this would not work. So let's talk about
what they could do.
He has said that to address the issue of food security in the future, in a span of 6 months' time, right, Ndindi? Yeah. For the next harvest, they are looking at input, subsidize farmers and the fertilizer for the farmers to address that, so that farmers then can manage to grow food, and then we can boost our food security, and we also deal with, what else are we dealing with? Rice. What else are we dealing with?
Edible oil.
Edible oils.
And much more.
Do you have issue with any of those three?
Indeed.
What is your issue with this fertilizer subsidy?
The fertilizer subsidy is not a new idea. In my when I was in Parliament in 2008, there was a big scandal involving the Ministry of Agriculture. And the big scandal had to do, in fact, with subsidized fertilizer and the delivery of. Okay? Again, you say, why don't we compare? Malawi did a far better job in running a fertilizer subsidy, and they did, in fact, succeed in more than doubling their grain production. But what we did, because of the administration of it, and this is why people have been advocating that why don't you use electronic vouchers, so that you remove the human intervention and the possibility of corruption and so on. Now, so fertilizer subsidy is not a new idea.
Okay, so you agree that it's a good idea because you people also tried it in 2008.
I mean, we not
what
just
is the issue
people,
with it this time?
Not just we people. Kenya has been working with fertilizer subsidy over the time. The fertilizer subsidy will work if the rest of the, for example, the irrigation side, so that we are not, for instance now, hopefully the rains will take hold, but if they don't, This is going to be one of the worst droughts.
What
that we
I'm
have ever
hoping
seen.
to hear.
Yeah, hear me.
is-
See, you have asked me. Can I answer?
Yeah, take actual issue and
Yes.
point the fault and where it is.
The fault is like this. Point number one, government sets the inflation expectations by giving a legal notice on price stability. What government should do is move it from 7.5 to 0. Who are the doers? The CS Treasury. If he's not moving fast enough, Parliament can take action and ask him to come and explain. So, action one. Action two, edible oils. By the way, edible oils is mainly, Malaysia more than Ukraine, but grain is Ukraine because we buy most of our wheat.
But Mheshimiwa, if I may just chime in, the truth is, Malaysia had a moratorium on exporting some of the inputs that we need
For their palm oil.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So
And let's go there.
yes,
Let's go there. The solution has always been that we should produce our own vegetable oils. And this question has put us sometimes in conflict with our neighbors, Tanzania, who also prefer to develop their own vegetable oil. So it's a longer term question. You are not going to, but it is to promote domestic production of. Now, what should we do? What should we do? We should remove edible oils from the special list of the common external tariff, which is what Tanzania has always been arguing that we stop doing, so that edible oils are treated as an intermediate product at say 10%, and thereby providing some
Mheshimiwa,
promotion for.
allow me to interrupt you here. You've been in the development world for a long time.
I have.
You're an economist.
I am.
In 1994, you were alive and well and kicking,
Indeed.
and you even had teeth, and you even knew how to insult people, meaning you're a full-grown human being.
In 1994.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. Now, the government of Kenya sent a specific group of individuals to go to India to study how this thing we're discussing, India turned around in 3 years. In 3 years, they turned it around.
Indeed.
Yes, this edible oil, problem with edible oil, what you do, and so forth. And they came back with an understanding of what ought to be done. Whether you grow sunflower, whether you grow soya, whether you grow groundnuts, whatever it is, and how you make sure regions that can do this are given the input and the wherewithal to do precisely this. The byproduct given as feed to cows, meaning a 360 way of dealing with this. They came back. The government then, and this was there, because it's a government body that went, how this ought to be done has always been within the very ministries that are supposed to handle these things. It has never been done.
I want us to go to
The
the
Kenya Oil Crops Development Corporation, it was called. 5 billion shillings worth of working capital was syndicated at that time.
And then
to support farmers
let's go to the news.
grow oil crops.
Let's go to the news, gentlemen. We'll come back. Our audience on KTN Home, please switch over to Spice FM across the country, or you can follow the conversation on Spice FM KE on YouTube and Facebook. We are live streaming that. It's 9 a.m. Ndindi, Nyoro and Muriithi will be here until 10. Time for the news.
Spice